So, it's my pleasure and honor to be the chair of this panel. My name is André Nagy. I am working at the IASC, and I am also still in these days a professor at the University of Pannonia, and I have spent many years or even decades to study how the United Nations is working and is not working, and this U-turn is also can be applied to the UN turn, U-turn, N, and so we can play with these words, but it's a very critical situation we are right now in this respect. So the challenges for the UN and the European Union in a rapidly changing world, this is the title of our panel discussion, and all the challenges that the European Union is facing, and there is this institution called the United Nations, which was designed 80 years ago just to handle all these challenges, and whether what's happened with the United Nations, this paralysis that somehow determines or describes the position of the United Nations, the current crisis, is it something that we can do something about? The Charter of the UN is repeatedly violated by its signatories very often. Is it became obsolete? And the Security Council veto power is the obstacle to successful crisis management. So these are the questions that we can also witness. I started my research many years ago, why the UN didn't do anything about the Hungarian 1956 revolution, but all you are here, and I was doing a lot of research thanks to Katalin, Bogyay, who used to be that time the ambassador of Hungary to the United Nations and opened up documents that were closed for 60 years at the United Nations. But we could witness what was happening in Syria, what was happening in Yugoslavia with the total passivity or the total paralysis of the United Nations, and what is happening right now in Ukraine, what is happening right now in Gaza, what is happening in Israel. At the same time, I don't want to sound negative, so we have to keep in mind that we have 12 peacekeeping missions of the United Nations, that these do not get to the headlines when some kind of crisis was avoided, and also there are 22 so-called special political missions, so we have to see it in its very complexity. I am not the person to be able to do that, so this is why we have this wonderful panel here, and I would invite Katalin Bogyay, who was not only the ambassador of Hungary to the United Nations, very successful several years. He was the president of the UNESCO, and she was the president of the UNESCO. She was also the deputy state secretary of cultural diplomacy. She is a professor at the Diplomatic Academy, and many, many more positions that you have in your little booklet. I would not want to quote that, but she is one of the greatest experts of the area from her own personal experiences and also from a theoretical point of view. And the keynote is Her Excellency Katalin Bogyay. So 20 minutes, and the others, I mean, in the panel we'll have 10 to 15 minutes, and we have 3 wonderful persons also on the floor who will start with the comments, and then we shall open the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. First of all, where is my, okay. Thank you very much. First of all, I'm a friend. I'm here as a friend of IASC, and it was really wonderful to see all the programs. It was in 2006 when I was state secretary responsible for Hungary's culture diplomacy that I came the first time, and I was mesmerized of the spirituality of the institution when I met the students, the professors, the researchers, and I have been advocating in the whole world about this Kőszeg as a fine place where souls meet, where civilizations meet, where cultures meet, where actually we can discuss openly and freely important topics. So it has been always a joy and pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation, and congratulations to all your successes and developments. And it's a never-ending story, I would say, what we can see here. So yeah, I'm like being a family member here. Most important for me to say that. But I would like to say just that it's great that I have here today friends, close friends and colleagues, in a way spiritual relatives who we have been working with the UN, in the UN, on the UN together. So András mentioned that we worked in the UN because he was doing a lot of research, writing books, and wanted to open files. And when I was the ambassador over there, we realized that the files about the 1956 revolution and the Hungarian files have been closed and classified for 60 years, 60 years. And no one asked really to open it besides the professor. But of course, to open these files at the UN and in Columbia University, because parts of the files were in Columbia kept, you need to have the diplomatic power. So I was very happy, and I said, okay, for the 60th anniversary of the UN, when Hungary entered the UN, 56th revolution, that was the 60th anniversary, we would like to open the files. And we managed to do that, and I'm very happy to see the books since published in Hungarian and in English going to be, with these documents, a little bit helpful, I think. But also, since I came back from New York and Paris and London, I'm very happy that I was elected the president of UN Association, and my vice president sits here. I would say a veteran diplomat, André Erdős, ambassador who served in the UN 3 times. He will talk about that. And he is a witness of many things, what were going on at the UN. I'm very happy to have Professor Koller, Boglárka with us, who is member of the Presidium of the UN Association. And this kind of organization, you know, we have more than 100 all over the world. These are civil society organizations working with the UN, working with governments, working with educational organizations, with academia. And of course, for us this year is very special because, of course, this is the 80th anniversary of the UN. And I brought Dr. Judy Kuriansky from New York, Columbia University, whom I've been working together, because we started a class. In her class, she was talking about the UN. So I said, okay, so let's talk about, she's a psychologist, talk about diplomacy and psychology. Let's talk about what kind of special abilities you need as a diplomat and as someone who serves at the UN. But she will talk about that later. So what I would like to say this year is not only about the 80th anniversary of the UN, it is the 70th anniversary when Hungary entered the UN. And András already said a few words, what a big scandal it was. We entered 55 and immediately 56 they had to set up the Hungarian Problem Committee. You know, we entered the World Organization. I remember, frankly, in 2004, we were in London. I did this big Magyar Magic Festival celebrating Hungary entering the European Union. The great friend, sadly, he passed away, a great writer. He told me, oh, Katalin, they don't know. We are entering. It will be a trouble. And it has become a trouble, but a part of the joke. I have to say that, obviously, this is also a year which marks the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration. And in my other chapeau, I set up the Women for Diplomacy International, which is an international movement, which I started in Paris and in New York. Judy is one of my founding members, where we are advocating in the whole world for giving more visibility, access, and power to women making diplomacy. Because as we know, the place of the women is everywhere where decisions are made. This is what we are obviously celebrating here today. Whether we are celebrating or not, we will see. But anyway, so I would like to say that in this very unique year, of course, we joined forces with the Ludovika University, and we started a big course with all the players here talking to students. And you know, in Ludovika College, you have students from all over the different universities. It's not only one university, to talk about the UN, the challenges, the results, and so on. We are continuing it in Balatonfüred, now traditionally celebrating what art and culture can do for peace. And then we move to the Hungarian Academy of Sciences and then finally we are dedicating at the university a special day for women's rights and the rights of minorities in December. Now, of course, the UN achievements over the decades were never foregone conclusions. They were the result of painstaking effort by people from all nations working together. We cannot simply turn our backs on that hard-won legacy, I believe. No state, large or small, stands to gain from the collapse of the multilateral system. This is not the moment to abandon it, but to renew and strengthen it. On June 26, 1945, the founding nations signed the UN Charter, not in peace, but in defiance of war's devastation, an act of hope and resolve. 50, 51, because Poland joined just a little bit 1 month later. 80 years later, that hope faces its gravest test. Today we have 193 members. We who have served somehow at the UN and its charter have witnessed its promise, its fragility, and its effectiveness and ineffectivenesses, we are really worried. Today the principles we swore to uphold are under systematic assault. War rages, authoritarianism spreads, facts drawn into propaganda, young people face exclusion and despair. So this is not merely about ignoring international law. This is about the systematic dismantling of the rule of law, piece by piece, norm by norm. The UN transcends, though, the Security Council, I would like to stress. The UN is a platform for negotiations, a guardian of international law, delivering education, healthcare, protecting workers, preventing conflicts from turning violent. So while peacekeepers courageously prevent massacres, the Charter's true promise lies in preventing wars before they begin. And we talked a little bit about that. I very much believe in the importance and strengthening the preventive diplomacy. Not solve the problems always, not solve the conflicts always, but prevent them. So these gains did not come easily. They can vanish overnight. So I think the anniversary calls for reckoning, not ritual. We need to return to the Charter's values: peace, development, human rights, rule of law, and faith in human dignity. A renewed commitment to truth over lies, integrity over corruption, solidarity over silence. When this international order collapses, and without urgent action, it's likely it will, rebuilding it will take generations. So we need a call for strengthening international law, we heard many times, preventing violent conflict, and transforming global financial systems to create opportunity for everyone, everywhere, rather than perpetuate inequality. Young people deserve our action, not our apologies. If we fail, the legacy we leave will be one of abandonment, not courage. Yesterday I had the chance to talk a little bit with His Excellency the Ambassador of South Korea, and I said I will quote now Ban Ki-moon, who was a great security Secretary General, and I used to work with him, and actually he had to open our files of Hungary because he knew what 1956 means for Hungarians. And when he was a little boy, a student, he wrote a letter to the then Secretary General asking the Secretary General help the Hungarians in their aspiration of freedom and democracy. So he knew what it meant for us, 1956. So in his final newsletter, before becoming an elder emeritus, what I read, Ban Ki-moon reflects on the United Nations 80-year legacy and calls for urgent reforms to ensure it serves and protects all of humanity. He says, the United Nations saved my family and my country during the Korean War. The organization has therefore always meant a great deal to me, even long before I became Secretary General. As he wrote in his note while stepping down from his role as Deputy Chair and becoming an Elder Emeritus. He was 6 years old at the time of the outbreak of the war. His family had to flee their home for the mountainside, from where they watched their villages burning. Those days were shaped by a sense of confusion, fear, and not knowing what might come next. But help came from beyond their borders. UN food relief operations brought vital nourishment. UNESCO provided textbooks to rebuild their education system. I remember I welcomed the Secretary General while I was the president of UNESCO General Conference, and we showed him the books, the textbooks, actually, what he was learning from, and we showed the whole world. So, you know, when you are thinking what the UN or UNESCO or the specialized agencies are doing, you know. And troops deployed from UN member states went to restore order and security. Just one example. When we look in today to the UN current state and credibility, the successes we have to bear in our mind, of course, are crucial. Peacekeeping missions, the UN has successfully conducted, and you said a little bit about that, numerous peacekeeping missions worldwide, helping to stabilize conflict zones and protect civilians. Humanitarian aid, the UN and its agencies like UNICEF, World Food Programme, and so on, provide essential humanitarian assistance, responding to crises caused by natural disasters and conflicts. Global health initiatives, the World Health Organization, and UN agency has been pivotal in addressing global health issues, such as the response to the COVID-19. Climate change leadership, the UN plays a significant role in global climate discussions with initiatives like the Paris Agreement aimed at combating climate change. And I always repeat that assistance in education worldwide, lifelong learning by UNESCO, or by protecting just the intangible or tangible world heritage, science cooperation, and so on. So soft power is on. I don't believe it's dead, and it shouldn't. So, but while it's crucial to celebrate many accomplishments of the UN over the 80 years, we must also ensure it's fit for purpose in the 21st century. The world of 80 years ago is fundamentally different from that today, and reform of the multilateral system, of course, is urgent and overdue. This is particularly glaring when we witness an inadmissible failure to protect civilians, whose fundamental rights seem not to matter. We all are concerned about the growing disregard among UN member states for the rule of law and human rights, along with the UN Charter itself. Multilateralism cannot function, let alone thrive, in the absence of commitment from governments. The UN doesn't just exist in the cloud. It can do only and as long as the governments want and support it. So let us just remember the crucial failures. I would just name three, okay. We can discuss that. Inability to prevent conflicts. So the lack of the diplomacy I was talking about, the prevention. So the UN has faced criticism for its failure to prevent genocides and conflicts, such as in Rwanda and Syria, for example, raising questions about its effectiveness in maintaining peace and security. Security Council limitations. We all know the Security Council was set up in 1945 according to the world order with the 5 veto power members. And the veto power held by US, UK, France, Russia, and China. And don't forget, it's only the US which is the same as it was in 1945. All the others, you know, has changed totally. And often leads to paralysis in decision-making, undermining the UN authority. We see that in 1956. We see it during Syria. We see it now during the Ukraine-Russia war. We see it now with the Israeli-Palestinian yes to the Iranian situation, we live with the UN every day. Now, Ban Ki-moon believes this time of unprecedented crisis for the multilateral system can be turned into a moment of opportunity. Right. Only if leaders seize this moment and take the long view. But will they? Would they? Will they ever consider? Well, the recent approval of the historic pandemic agreement, don't forget, shows us that there is a determination. If there is a determination, there is result. This stands in stark contrast to the current paralysis, of course, of the Security Council. There is now broad support for its reform to improve both the representativeness and effectiveness of the Council, but I must say, it is a very hard work. I served there 6 years. We had a special group of which I served, and we were hoping that the member states would sign a special paper, meaning nobody would use the veto power if it is a matter of genocide or crime against humanity. I went to the American representative. I asked her to sign. That was Samantha Power at that time. She said, Katalin, you don't think so? I would give up the veto power ever. Then, you know, we are leaving the UN. I went to the Russian ambassador that time, Vitaly Churky, fantastic ambassador. He said, Katalin, you are not serious. We are signing this. Then you can push the whole UN to Washington. I went to China. They were smiling, you know, Chinese diplomacy. Oh, Ambassador, Your Excellency, you are so kind. You know, we will discuss it, and then we will get back to you. France and Britain signed, and 100 and about 23, 33 countries by now. That's not enough. If the US and Russia is not signing, what can we do? Anyway, we are not giving up hope. So another potential moment for change is the appointment of the next UN Secretary General. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, it is morally indefensible that after 80 years, a woman has never led the United Nations. Many of us have been advocating for a woman to be appointed through a transparent and merit-based process. Again, I would like to say I was part of another group while I served there, through which we managed to start sort of creating a more visible and open process choosing the Secretary General. We introduced the interviews for the candidates of Secretary Generals and the President of the General Conference. And frankly, if they did not perform well, whoever would have wanted them support, they could have not do that. So we are continuing this process, and we are advocating for now the woman who is somewhere, I hope, ready to take this big challenge. Anyway, this historic gender imbalance must be addressed, especially at a time when regressive forces are working to roll back women's rights around the world. Don't forget, that's why it's so important to remember what we signed 30 years ago in Beijing. And who believe in the importance of multilateralism and in the rule of law, believe that surely necessary reforms are needed in the Security Council, strengthening accountability, enhancing funding and resources, improving coordination among nations, and we have to talk about the future viability and trust. I mean, believe me, if you are diplomacy, you just meet this lack of trust all the time. And we really have to believe that global cooperation, the UN's effectiveness relies on cooperation among member states. It cannot be done otherwise. But regional groups, regional interests are getting more and more important, and also their representation. But building trust among world leaders is essential, particularly regarding shared challenges like climate change, health crisis, and security threats. Public perception, increasing transparency, and engaging with civil society can enhance the UN credibility. I very much believe in strengthening the role of the civil society in our work, and addressing global inequalities. Really, the UN must tackle global issues such as poverty, inequality, climate change. We don't have time to talk about SDG 30s. Obviously, we will not get there by 2030, but we have the lines, what we agreed on, and at least we have a direction. So in conclusion, while the UN has achieved significant successes, it faces critical challenges that need to be addressed through meaningful reforms. In credibility and future will depend on the collective commitment of its member states to uphold its founding principles and adapt to contemporary global challenges. And I also believe, give peace a chance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A lot of food for thoughts and a wonderful presentation, wonderful starting of the panel. And we were discussing briefly yesterday that women's role in politics, how important it will be. So maybe it's not a U-turn, but a W-turn, that women should have a more important role. Anyhow, I think that it's wonderful, and I'm very grateful for all the details Her Excellency mentioned, and also to introduce other members of the panel. But let me introduce the ambassador of the Danish Kingdom to Hungary, Christian Thorning, and he is not only representative of the Danish Kingdom to Hungary and to Slovenia, but also an international law expert, international lawyer, holding a PhD, so in that sense a colleague of the academic environment, and also a very experienced, more than 30 years experience diplomat who also has a major familiarity with Hungary. Plus, Denmark is right now the president of the European Union, so the position of this small but very significant country is also very powerful. Just let me give a footnote that when I started my research in the United Nations, that was because of a Danish diplomat, Paul Bang-Jensen, who played a very important role in the Hungarian 1956 Revolution's investigation committee at the United Nations, and probably gave his life to for Hungary. But this is my footnote, and the floor is yours, His Excellency.
Thank you so much, and first of all, of course, thank you for inviting me, and I'm very happy to be here in Kusek, and if I may take you up on your invitation, Mr. Mayor, to look around. I just arrived this morning, so I've not really had the time yet, but I promise you I will before I head back to Budapest tomorrow. So that's a promise. Whether I come up with any suggestions, I doubt it. Anyway, actually, I just made a few notes here. I mean, and André, you mentioned Paul Bang-Jensen. I've just put him down here, actually, also on my note to just remind about him. And yes, he became, as I understand, the secretary for the 56 committee, the Danish diplomat. And very famously, he refused to hand over the files, not to incriminate the dissidents of Hungary. So very dramatically, he burned the files on the roof of the UN building in New York. Now, I don't know how they look upon him in New York at the UN, but I know that, as you hinted, here in Hungary, he is, I believe, considered a hero. And you can find his memorial in the, at the entrance of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Budapest. So now my own, just to finish off on that, I mean, I started out as an intern at the refugee agency, UNHCR, in Geneva. And then after I joined the Foreign Service, I was back in '99, sent as reinforcement to the Danish mission in New York during the General Assembly. And I remember that for 2 days we discussed the reform of the Security Council. 26 years later, I just put it to you, how do we think it goes about that dossier? Now, personally, I'm happy to see that currently Denmark is indeed in the Security Council, occupying one of the rotating seats. But that's somehow another story. And then my last point on the UN. Yes, next Secretary General, a female. I mean, I put it to you, you could perhaps consider putting forward one of the female ministers in the Hungarian government for that position. If not, I have a couple of Danish prime ministers, and if it wasn't for her advanced age, I'm pretty sure Queen Margrethe would be an excellent Secretary General. Now, I am indeed very happy and honored to have been invited here to this panel on the challenges for the UN and the European Union in a rapidly changing world, a world that indeed finds itself in a geopolitical crossroad, as you have also very correctly put in the material for this summer university. Now, if you would allow me, I will focus on the Europe side, and I will indeed do that because, well, as we are not currently in the presidency of the European Union, we will be so as of next week. 1st of July, we take over the presidency, and this is the 8th time that Denmark does so, but this is certainly not a time to be complacent. I mean, the Danish EU presidency will not be business as usual. The EU's relative global weight is shrinking. Our security is under pressure. We have war on European soil. The European competitiveness is challenged. And we do indeed feel pressure on the transatlantic relations. Now, our approach to all of this, as formulated in our slogan for the EU presidency, is a strong Europe in a changing world. The observant listener might have detected that by citing our slogan, I have already indicated what we see as the solution to the challenges, namely a strengthening of Europe. And let us not despair. We can do it in Europe. Now, we saw in the keynote here this morning the presentation about how we are directing ourselves towards less cooperation. But I put it to you, not in the EU. The keynote speaker also quite rightly said, yeah, but we can also change that by design, which I also noted and couldn't agree more. So what is it we should do or do better? Let me mention 6 points very briefly. In our view, we need to, 1, become better at leveraging our power and partnerships. And that requires a whole of government approach and a willingness to create linkages across sectors. And number 2, and as perhaps part of this, we should use the European trade policy more strategically. At a time where the US is isolating itself more and building tariff walls around it, many countries around the world wish to deepen trade and investment relationships with us. And we should take that opportunity as a union. I feel tempted to say, never let a good crisis go to waste. 3rd, we should build a more equal partnerships with countries in the global south based on mutual interests. And this is about political attention and respect, but it is also very much about economic opportunity. I have sympathy for the European Union's so-called global gateway to continue as the approach to all this. However, the global gateway, I don't know if you heard about it, but it should be more operational. Now, 4th, we should, now I think at this point I will rephrase it and I say, we must put ourselves in a position to be able to defend ourselves. Rearming and building a true European defense industry is in this respect crucial. And I put it to you, Chairman, if I can put it like that, this is not in opposition to peace or the peace image. It is indeed a prerequisite to ensure it. And I put it to our keynote speaker, we don't have 10 years to do this. We have to act and implement now. Fifth point, in line of all of what I've just mentioned, I should like to point to the need for the European Union to adopt a new multi-annual budget that gives us flexible instrument to pursue all our objectives. And being able to act and to program everything 7 years into the future, as it is now, is not compatible. We need more agility, and we need a more modernized EU budget. I'll leave it at that. Sixth and finally, now that I've already touched upon the money issue, let me be extremely clear that we should be aware of the fact that nothing works without a functioning economic base. And this is about competitiveness, economic security. And it's about reducing undue dependence on individual countries in critical sectors. I also leave that there. Now, this in a nutshell is how we see things, and this is what will guide us through our presidency. And only last week, the Danish Minister for Europe presented our presidency priorities, and I will not go into any details, nor is that necessary, because we have formulated two overarching goals that in a way fully encompassing our approach. And the first goal is a secure Europe, and that is a Europe capable of meeting urgent shared challenges, standing in its own right as a geopolitical actor. In your overall pitch, and you mentioned it also before, you ask if we were in a scenario of fatigue and disengagement when it comes to further enlargement of the European Union with the Western Balkan states. And to this, my answer is the current geopolitical development that forces us to build a truly secure Europe, at the same time also underline the need to enlarge the Union. An ambitious and merit-based enlargement will make the EU geopolitically stronger. In our view, Ukraine is the engine for such a momentum. However, the momentum is recreated, and it includes a necessary focus on Moldova and the Western Balkan states as well. Now, I'm nearly done, but just to mention our second overarching goal, which is a competitive and green Europe. In tandem with enhanced work on the competitive issue, and there are several which are quite fundamental, and they are underlined in the so-called Draghi report, and indeed actually reflected also in the Budapest Declaration that was adopted during the Hungarian presidency last year. The Danish presidency will work to ensure that the EU continues to demonstrate leadership when it comes to climate action, including through an ambitious 2040 target. And climate action and green transition do not stand in opposition to the competitive Europe. It supports European competitiveness. I think by this I have concluded my preliminary remarks, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I think it's also was very encouraging, very inspiring for the future discussion, not only for this panel, but also for the next days. And it's very interesting. There is another wonderful Danish person, Søren Kierkegaard, the philosopher, who said that we live the life forward, but we understand always backward. So I think that's a very important. notion that we have to keep in mind, but it's my pleasure and honor to introduce Boglárka Koller from the University Ludovika of Public Service. She is the full professor of the Jean Monnet Chair of Excellence. She graduated at the Corvinus University. She was at the Central European University, also holds a degree from there, and beside many other very important positions, she is also a board member of the United Nations Association. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you, yeah, oh, very good. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. Looking at the past programs of this conference, this is not the first time I'm here, so I'm back here again. And as you, I was listening to the keynote speakers and also the contributions of the panel. I tried to give you something else, because all what we are looking in the world, we are looking it through the eyes, with European eyes, and also for us, it's important to look at through Central Europe as well. I am the president of Central European Political Science Association, so it's very important I have a Central European heart as well. And I wanted to show you my Jean Monnet Center of Excellence, which is about core projects and cultivating our European resilience and evolution. So I truly believe that the revolution the evolution can be supported by the enhancing the resilience of Europe. So I will show you some academic, maybe I will jump some of the slides because you were talking about it, but I would like to show you how I look at where we are currently. So first of all, 80 and 70 was already mentioned by Katalin as well, but I put another number here because, and this is the 75, because that's the anniversary of Schuman Declaration. So in between I put Europe somehow into these numbers. And it's very important to emphasize this because we mentioned, and speakers also mentioned, that the United Nations and the European Union has a kind of value basis, which is the same if we would like to dig into these documents, and I don't have time to do that now, but we are also celebrating this. And another comment to that, sometimes, and this is a kind of picture of the crises Europe went through, and I could put other pictures on this slide. But we are in Europe, and I agree with the keynote speaker that we have a milestone somewhere in 2008 and 2009 financial and economic crisis. But since then in Europe, we are constantly talking about a kind of polycrisis, a multiple crisis, and I think you can, on the basis of just the pictures, you can say which were during this time period the milestones of this crisis areas. But we have Jean Monnet, and that's my third Jean Monnet project. So Jean Monnet also said that we can be we can feel ourselves very depressed if we look at and after the keynote and now the contributions as well. But crises are also opportunities, and don't underestimate Europe's capacity to reinvent itself, because as Jean Monnet said, it is possible. Nevertheless, and you see this scissor, and I like to use visuals, is that we are not only talking about EU and all the 27 member states as one unity, but these crises also caused a lot of fractures among the member states as well. So we have to talk about the individual member states. So for us, Hungarians, European level, the Central European Club, Visegrad, and then we can also talk about what is the Hungarian position in all of these happenings around us. And the problem with these crisis areas is like the tree metaphor as well, that we don't see we have many roots underneath the soil, so we just experience that the leaves are falling, but these are, we don't see always the roots of that. Again, I don't have to underline this, that the European Union experienced changes in the external environment and tried to provide answers to that. I don't have time to analyze everything of that, but I also agree with the speakers before me that there is an absolutely new era for Europe, and this is one of the milestones in 2022. Yes, the European Union is committed to the multilateral international system. It is in the treaties, but as you see, we in Europe, we have also many heads who are expressing the views, so there is not only one person in the leadership position in the European Union. And there is a strong relationship between the EU and the UN, and here I also want to emphasize that it is actually a dependency on EU funds, the UN's dependency on EU funds, and the funds coming from the member states as well. And this is an increasing EU financing, but if things are changing, the big question is how can we foresee a kind of independence in the future on the EU funds if the EU needs these funds for other policy areas? The big question here is, I edited this book a couple of years ago with a Russian scholar who in the US I published this, who I haven't seen since the outbreak of the war. But my big question is, because we were writing in this book about the regional actors. So if we talk about changes in the international system, and we always talk about states as very important actors, so the big question is that maybe the regional actors can be solutions for that. We gave this title to this. I'm not sure, because we can also define the EU as a regional integration. So it is kind of, and we always talk about geopolitical actor or actorness. We all know that the European Union is very different from a classic international organization, because some of its policies are implemented at supranational level. But we can, if we talk about theories in IR, the big question is if regional actors can protect the states, or can provide another kind of grouping in this international system that are able to provide answers to current challenges. I think so. That's why we gave the book, and it was before the war. So I think that as academics, we have to research more trans-regionalism, regional integration, and it's not only a European invention, because if we look around in the world, we see that at other parts of the world, regional organizations, free trade associations, customs unions are providing answers to the challenges. So it's a question to you to discuss what do you think about it. And now the other milestone, the turning point, and it's very important to emphasize this. This is the Trump 2.1 era, which actually provided absolutely a new atmosphere for multilateral diplomacy, and also the European policy making as well. And there are a lot of small things I can mention here, but I think that it also created a push for new policy developments at the European level as well, and making it faster, because European Union, and I'm a very pro-Europe person, but EU is designed to provide answers rather slowly to challenges. But what we can see currently is that the EU tries to actually change this kind of methodology. And I'm happy that the first keynote speech was about security policy, because I want to show you as an example to the new developments, which are absolutely new in Europe, and what the EU countries try to do to change the security architecture in Europe. And this is this is going to be something which I think you know what is this, the coalition of the willing, which happened at the beginning of this year. And if you analyze this family picture, you will recognize that not all of the EU member states are on this family picture, but some states which are not European states are also on the picture, which is very important. So 30 plus states are involved here. You will not find for example, our prime minister on this family picture, but you will find Canada and Japan on the picture as well. So what I want to, because I only have 10 minutes to actually argue that in the European Union, the European integration is not going to look like the same as we saw it in the couple of decades in the past. And the EU integration invented a kind of differentiated model. If the member states are not able to provide policy answers within the framework of the European Union, then some member states, not all, can tell that, okay, I will invent something either outside the EU framework, and we have an example for that because Schengen was invented outside the EU legal framework and later became part of the acquis communautaire. And we have now a treaty-based solution for that. This is called enhanced cooperation. So we are looking at not a unified integration model in the future. So not all the 27 member states have to cooperate in everything, in every policy initiation, but only some can do that. Why is it important for us? Because if we see a European integration changing in that direction very fast, which I think it is the case now, then overlapping layers of integration are emerging. And I think there is a clear signs that this is the case now. And if we go back to this coalition of the willing, so what happened actually? That outside the EU framework, not only EU member states, but other states, for example, United Kingdom took the leadership in this coalition of the willing. They establishing a cooperation, which means that the core of European integration, maybe it's going to be outside the EU framework, and other states can cooperate in this. Or later, they can also incorporate it into the acquis communautaire. So if the European integration is going to go toward this direction, and we see that some signs that the EU is going to go toward this integration model, then for a member state, if a member state would like to be on the board in important policy initiations, then have to look at these developments. So for example, and if we mentioned another policy area development, enlargement. There are a lot of discussions about gradual enlargement and these kind of things. This fits into this model because if the EU is not able to provide solutions which are supported by all the 27 member states, or if the EU wants to keep some candidate states as partners but not involve them as full members, they are going to be the candidates in some layers of these developments. Why is it important? Because you can imagine, if we are talking about these overlapping layers of integration, that for a country like Hungary, it's very important, or Central European states, where are they going to be in this model? In the outer skirt, outer layer of integration, or are we going to belong to the core? And what I see, and that also relates to what has been said already, that 2 or 3 years ago we always had conferences about Visegrad cooperation and everything. But now what we are experiencing, for example, Poland's role in international system, Poland is more looking toward to the Weimar Triangle and to establish cooperations with the core, and not Hungary and not Slovakia anymore. So it is an absolutely changed environment within Europe, and we have to watch in which layer of this differentiated integration a particular country is going to be. And it's very important if we are analyzing the role of the Visegrad states, Slovakia, Hungary, Czechia, and Poland, because this is the case. And it can also easily remain that some cooperations, if there is an intergovernmental treaty outside the EU framework, they are remaining permanently outside the EU framework, and this can be a new core of Europe. So you can actually find yourself outside the EU very easily, not leaving the EU, but only cooperating with other countries. So it's easier as legally as possible. So I think it's a very important new development and a fast development in the EU. So yes, we are in a global value contest. We are in a changing world order. Regional organizations or regional entities maybe are suitable to provide answers to the new challenges. We are in a polycrisis, but both the European Union and the UN is a value-based entity. They are different in nature because the EU has supranational policies, and if we like it or not, but member states signing the accession treaty, they already transferred some of their sovereignty to the EU level. So if we need new coalitions for a rule-based order, and coalitions are only possible among like-minded partners. So countries have to reassess their strategies in this, and have to reassess in what regional organizations that would like to participate. We need institutional creativity. We need people, because history of European integration also demonstrated that sometimes visionary thinkers provided these answers. And we need a stronger EU and UN cooperation. UN is going to be very much dependent on the European Union because of the funds, because of the same rule-based kind of approach. But I also have to mention here that nowadays we are talking about the new multi-annual financial framework in the European Union. And what is, always a big fight among member states, who gets what. But a new message for the countries who are not sharing this rule-based approach is that they are going to get less funds, because cohesion policy, defense, everything is going to be based on common values. So it's another thing that policy developments are also showing this kind of value-based approach. Rule of law, for example, who gets funds? Who are sharing this rule of law approach, which is the same in the EU and the UN. But the other big thing is who is going to pay for everything. So we don't have money for everything, for this defense development, for the maintaining the Green Deal is a big, was mentioned here. If you see the latest developments, latest results of European opinion poll surveys, we can say that in 2021, the green goal was the first one for all the Europeans, mostly shared by the northern countries, but now it's on the place of the 9th place as a priority for the European citizens. So it's a kind of fading narratives for the citizens. What is important for them is security, defense, and how they are going to maintain their European way of life. And I have a lot others to tell you, but I don't have time. So a quote from Jean Monnet: "People only accept change when they are faced with necessity, and only recognize necessity when a crisis is upon them." Thank you very much.
Thank you for this very interesting and very inspiring presentation, and we are in a very special position in this panel that we have an absolute majority, a two-third majority at least, of ambassadors. So now there will be comments, and I will ask first the veteran diplomat, one of the most experienced diplomats, probably the most experienced doyen of the Hungarian diplomatic corps, André Erdős, who served Hungary as the United Nations representative of the country during the communist time, and later he was also the ambassador of Hungary to the United Nations. He served also in the Security Council when Hungary was a member of the Council, and he was serving on very different, very high-level boards, both in Hungary and the United Nations. He's a deputy or vice president of the United Nations Association and the Atlantic Council. So I will ask for André for his comments. As you want. Yes. But inside the room.
You can come here. You can come here, André. Please.
Oh,
So that everyone can see you.
you want me to stand there,
Please,
right?
Yeah.
God.
If you would like.
Okay.
We take a picture.
Egy párat csináltam.
Yes, of course. I will take a picture.
Yeah, okay.
Well, my topic obviously is the reform of the United Nations. And as you know, 1945 is one thing. Then suddenly, at the end of the Cold War period, a new period started from the bilateral world into a multilateral world, as we called them at that time, in 1990 and on. And immediately after this historic change, already at the UN started, quite understandably, an intention from many sources to look at the UN to see whether the UN reflects the realities of the world. And clearly, everybody said that we must change something. We must reform the United Nations. And at the beginning of the 90s already, some small things happened in terms of organization, in terms of secondary importance, which indicated that things that were considered as a taboo during from 45 to 90 started to slowly diminish and disappear in a way. It did not obviously mean that the whole thing has been changing, but it indicated that there was some kind of a tendency to look at it. And if you look at the Charter of the United Nations, the words were written back in 1945, and since that time, only once we have changed the Charter. When it came to, as a result of the decolonization process, we increased the number of the non-permanents from 6 to 10. This was the only change in the Charter, and everything remains the same, including, and here I obviously don't want to, how should I say, create a panic among those amongst you who are citizens of this country, but according to the Charter, those countries that were at war with the signatories of the United Nations are enemy states. So here we are with the Germans, the Japanese, and many others who, according to the Charter, are still considered, legally speaking, as enemy states. Clearly, it really doesn't mean a lot, but it means that, yes, we have to reshake the Charter and see how we can move ahead. Already some countries formally presented their application to become permanent members. That was also a totally new thing before. The so-called G4 presented this proposal, namely India, Brazil, China, and Germany, to become permanent members of the Council. This was a dramatic new situation that you've never seen before. Since that time, some other countries continued with the same request, including the Africans, because we know the Africans are not at all present in the Security Council. Today, in 2025, it's really a mind-boggling situation. And also some resolutions were adopted by the General Assembly. I have to make it sure that you understand the resolutions of the General Assembly are not legally binding, and the Security Council's resolutions are. So the General Assembly adopted a resolution on the responsibility to protect, which means that if a given country's given government is not ready or is not willing to protect their own citizens, the United Nations is ready to take a collective action. I have obviously to say that it's not the total copying of what was laid down on paper, because there was a small addition: collective action through the Security Council, which means that obviously it was up to the Security Council to decide on collective actions, if you will, military ways to solve some problems. And you know that the UN is not a world government. The Secretary General is not able to instruct Washington, Beijing, or Paris to do this and that. It depends, as it was said, by the way, by Katalin a moment ago, it depends on the political will of the members of the United Nations, and especially of the Security Council member. To give you an example, we all know about what happened in Srebrenica during the conflict, during the disintegration of Yugoslavia. And the conflict in Srebrenica was called by the International Court of Justice as a genocide. And years after, a member of the Security Council presented a proposal to the Security Council to adopt a similar resolution, labeling Srebrenica as a genocide. And it was rejected by one country, you can guess which country, which means that the permanent members' competence has been with us since 1945, and it still continues. But if you look at the regular meetings of the United Nations General Assembly where all the heads of state are there, this time already, quite naturally, almost everybody, including the permanent members of the Security Council, speak about reforming the Security Council. It obviously is something that I usually say to my students, don't expect tomorrow morning at 8:30 a change from this point of view, because it is the most sensitive problem. And if you look at the various countries that want to become members of the Security Council, which obviously would require a consensus among the present members of the Security Council, if you see Japan there, can you imagine that China would vote for Japan to become a Security Council member? It's hard to imagine, at least in this present situation of international relations. And in many other cases, we have obviously difficulties, but we cannot avoid this because it still is on the table. And as we go into this very turbulent period of time in which we are, we will certainly need more and more a Security Council which could be a decisive decision-making body reflecting the present realities of the world. Now, I know that already the Security Council, as it is today, has been a difficult thing to handle, for instance, the crisis in Yugoslavia and in other countries, in Rwanda. So we know that already the present situation is not very promising. And I add my own views that if we achieve to reform the Security Council by admitting more countries from various parts of the world, the future colleagues who will be working in the Security Council would have a much troublesome period. It would be much more difficult. There is this feeling at the United Nations about which I'm just talking to you, because if you take a very interesting resolution adopted a couple of years ago in the Security Council, it said that if in the Security Council a permanent member casts its veto on something, then within 10 days, that permanent member will have to explain its decision before the General Assembly. It doesn't mean that that permanent member will change the situation, but at least optically and publicly, it really represents a further pressure on think about twice or three times about what you're doing. But again, as I see today, I welcome all these new developments at every levels, but I do not think that it will be very easy to achieve a transformation of the present situation, which reflects obviously the situation after World War II. We are far away from that, and what we can do is just to continue to maintain, to keep alive this problem in the Security Council also, and also in the General Assembly, to see how the present situation will help us go ahead. If you look at the present situation today, obviously it's a further impediment to move ahead and reach this final result that we all are aspiring to. but it must be done because the UN should be a reflection of the world. It's an organization which not only in terms of security, but also in terms of every areas of human activity is there. In every area of human activity, you can see a role played by the United Nations. This is why, finishing, I believe that all those who suggest that we should disband the United Nations, we should eliminate this, would commit one of the most terrible mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really very important. I think questions will follow, not now, but a bit later. Thank you. So I greatly appreciate, and I think that was something very important and very kind of from first-hand experience. Now we have another comment from another ambassador, Andor Nagy, and who was the ambassador of Hungary to Austria and to Israel. He had his education at first University, but also the Freie Universität in Berlin and also Harvard Business School, and I think a very experienced diplomat who has also long tradition with Ferenc and with Kőszeg as well. So the floor is yours.
With your permission, I will drink some water.
Because you are allowed. We vote on that.
Only water.
I abstain. Stay. So please hold on.
I'm not as experienced as Mr. Ambassador André Erdős, but I spent 5 years in Israel, and my topic will be, of course, a comment on the European Union's challenges. But let me recall you two memories from that time I spent in Israel. I landed in Israel 2013, and in the second week, the foreign minister of Hungary, Mr. Mátonyi, paid an official visit to Israel and met with Netanyahu. And I was allowed to participate at this very meeting. And let me share you two things. I cannot share everything with you, but let me share you two things from this conversation. Mátonyi was speaking about Europe, the European Union, and the role of Germany, how important it is that Germany has a very strong lady, Angela Merkel. And after a while, Netanyahu asked Mr. Mátonyi, but tell me how comes that Germany can lead the European Union without having an army? And that time, it was 2013, it was an interesting question. The second topic was migration. 2013, Netanyahu and the whole Israeli government built a fence between Egypt and Israel because the Bedouins smuggled 70,000 Africans into Israel. And it was a big problem that time, and Netanyahu and the Israeli government made a decision, a very tough decision, to build a fence. And Netanyahu told to Mátonyi, I know that everyone is criticizing me, but I don't care. What matters, this is the Israeli interest. And my people don't want to have illegal immigrants in my country. And he was asking Mr. Mátonyi, can you imagine that one day, if the illegal migration will grow to Europe, you will be building a fence? And Mátonyi said immediately, no, it is impossible. It was exactly Hungary who destroyed the Iron Curtain in 1989. And it was 2013. And within 2 years, the whole world changed extremely. And Hungary built a fence. I don't want to comment it. I just want you an example for the situation, how rush and how rapidly is the world changing. And you know, when this summer academy has been published, I think Ferenc and the others never thought that yesterday the United States will go to war. You have never expected that Israel will attack Iran. I spent 5 years in that country, And the main message of the Israelis was all the time that Iran is the main enemy of Israel. It is about our very existing, and you cannot questioning the right of Israel to attack someone who is jeopardizing the life of the Israelis after the Holocaust. We don't know this feeling, and you cannot imagine what does it mean if a country will be attacked. Thanks God, in Europe, we don't know this situation except the Ukraine, because we are living in peace. In that part of the European Union, there is no war until now. But in this country, and I am not as experienced as a diplomat, but I had to make the experience how to come down 3 times a day to the shelter. And it changed my whole life. I understood immediately that you can lose everything if you are attacked. And I changed my mindset, and I am convinced that security is the most important thing in our life. If you have it, you don't feel it. But if you don't have it, it is sometimes too late. But now I go back to my topic, and I don't want to compete the Danish ambassador. I will bring you 5 points. He had 6. And unfortunately, I must repeat some points you have been mentioning and he was mentioning, because we are speaking on the same topic. Let me start my comments by saying that Europe is, in spite of the difficulties, not in decline. Europe is in flux. Europe is in changing. We are witnessing a transformation process. And it is a kind of structural reconfirmation of institutes, of alliances, old alliances, and old industries. And let me give you or highlight you the 5, let me say, fronts of this transformation process. The number 1 front, we can call it like from the peace dividend to the defense doctrine. What does it mean, peace dividend? This is an expression which was used by George W. Bush Sr., meaning that peace dividend means that there are countries who are spending not enough money for defense. It is a very limited and very reduced expenditure on defense, but at the same time they are enjoying the advantages of, for example, of the NATO. And you were mentioning, both of you, I think, that this time of the so-called automatically secured US security guarantees, we cannot take it anymore granted. It's over. And Europe must be alone in the situation to defend itself. But how to do it? And then Mr. Ambassador, and I think you were mentioning at the same time that it takes a long time. What we can do? I go back shortly to what Netanyahu was saying that time. How comes that Germany can lead the European Union without having a strong army? And now, 25, Germany is the top expenditure in defense cost, 1 billion euros will be spent for the rearmament of Germany. They want to establish an army with 1 million soldiers. I am not afraid. I don't want to recall the time of the Second World War. It is a very different time. And I think it was time to act for Germany. France is also leading in this respect. And Poland has become military very, very strong. So this is a big change. It is part of the transformation I told you before. And now I want to speak up loudly the topic of the Ukraine-Russian war. The Ukraine, they are fighting very bravely and very tough, unexpectedly very tough, of course with the assistance of the Western European and the Americans, very tough. But can you imagine that they have an army with 800,000 or 1 million soldiers? And not only that, they are combat experienced soldiers. And if you give together the numbers of the soldiers of the NATO stationing in Europe, the Great Britain, France, Germany, Spain, and the other countries, it is 50% of this number. This is the reason why I think the rapid and the very fast entering of into the European Union and of Ukraine is so important for the mainstream of the European Union. Namely, the only army who is capable now to protect Europe for the short run, this is the Ukraine. And that is the dilemma, you know, how to face this situation. The second front of this transformation process is the industry. After the US introduced the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, and the Chinese came with this state capitalism pushing onto Europe, Europe had to introduce also tools which were taboo before, like subsidies, tariffs, and the so-called strategic framework schemes. We have to find a response on this pushing both from the US and both from the Chinese. The third front of this transformation process is that Europe is a kind of crossfire of tariffs. We cannot really react of Donald Trump introduce measures harming the European economy by tariffs, 10%, 15%, 20%. What can we do with that? We have to find out how to deal with situation as well. And Europe must learn a lot from the so-called Huawei case. Maybe you remember that the United States tried to blackmail this Chinese company, but the end result was not destroying of the Huawei, but exactly the opposite. Huawei has become more innovative and more effective. And the fourth front of this transformation process, which is undergoing now in Europe, is politics. There is a so-called democratic paradox in Europe. What does it mean? There are many countries where the people are voting for disruption. Look at Austria. The Freedom Party won the elections. Look at France, Germany, Sweden, or even Holland. The far-right parties are coming up. There are countries where they win the elections, or even not winning but topping the polls. So what I want to tell you that people want to disrupt the old system, but the political system is remaining the same. The centrist parties are making coalitions which you never thought that it is possible. And I think it will cause us tensions for the future. And the fifth front of this transformation process, and now I'm coming to the end of my comments, this is the energy issue. You heard in the news yesterday that the Iranian parliament made a decision, shutting down the so-called Strait of Hormuz. Those who are not familiar with this situation, just give me 1 minute to explain it. There is a 50 miles wide strait between the Omani and Persian Bay, and 20% of the world oil and gas production is floating through this very limited, very narrow strait, and it will be closed. And we do not see the consequences of these measurements. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran deliver on this strait their oil and gas into Asia. South Korea is affected, Japan is affected, so we cannot see at the moment what kind of consequences it will have on the European decision makers as well. And we cannot be naive. The Irani-Israeli war will affect us as well, minimum in 3 different issues. The first one is the migration. It will improve the number of illegal migrants from this region because it will be, I am afraid, a kind of regional conflict. The second is the terrorist attack, and the third one is the energy issue. And I am finishing now, and summarizing, I want to say that there is a volatility in Europe, but I don't think that this is dangerous. It is an option. We cannot see it as a risk to be avoided. It is a task to manage. And I'm very positive on that. The situation is tough, but we will never give up.
Brilliant. Very good, very clever. Yeah, Rene. Bravo.
Thank you. These were wonderful words closing your comments. And now time is running, but we are very happy to welcome here Judy Kuriansky. She is a clinical psychologist, professor at Columbia's Teachers College, and also an acclaimed journalist, publisher. And as Her Excellency Katalin Bogyay mentioned, she was also giving classes about psychology and the UN. Unfortunately, our time is very limited, but we are very excited to hear what you are going to say. You will be provided even a mic.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm always bringing things. And so I have a few things I'd like to share with you in my time about the UN, because I've been at the UN for 22 years as leading several NGOs, so in civil society. And in the last 2 years, I switched over to government, and I am an advisor to a small West African country, member state, Sierra Leone. And so I've seen the UN from both sides of both the governments and also civil society. So I'll make a few comments about the UN. And then I've been asked to speak about mental health at the UN because that is... What do you all think about mental health at the UN? And there have been a lot of advances in that direction. So there's good news about that, although bad news in other ways. Are you all familiar with this, right? Can you help me hold this up? Okay, these are the Sustainable Development Goals. Who else wants one? I brought a few. Yeah? Okay. So now, there is depression that is throughout the United Nations because these 17 goals, which came out of 8 from the Millennium Development Goals, which are the framework for, some of you well know, that the governments decided that they were going to accomplish by 2030. That's not too long from now. So no poverty, no hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, sustainable cities that I want here, the city Firenze to be part of, climate change we've talked about, and peace and security. Okay, how many of you think this is the government's decided by 2030 they're going to accomplish all of this agenda? They started in 2015. Do we have, how many of you think we've accomplished peace and security by the year 2030? Raise your hand. No. Nobody. Okay, well, what's happening in the government? How many of you think we will have no poverty by the year 2030? Are you scratching your head, or you just are you not sure? Okay. How many of you think that we will have climate action to help the climate by the year 2030? You're just doing this, right? You're not agreeing, okay? And protection of the environment in 14 and 15. How many of you think we'll have the environmental protection? Nobody. Well, look what's going on here at the UN. People are depressed. The Secretary General admits it, says, we are failing. We are getting a C. How many of you want a C in college? Do you want a C? No. It is affreux. Absolutely horrific. Now, what is going to happen in that now it is starting that we will start to renegotiate these 15. The Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, will now become something else by 2030. And the MDGs were ending by 2015, and they started 5 years or more before in Rio when we all went. So soon, we will have another agenda, because this one is moot already, and we don't know what it's going to be called. Some people are calling it the RDGs, the Resilient Development Goals. That's a big word at the UN. Some people are calling it, UAE wants to call it the XDGs for the unknown. So we will see what happens with that. So that's not great news, is it? But this is what everybody is depressed about. And the HLPF is going on next week at the UN, the high-level political forum, when governments have signed up to talk about whether they have done a good job in any of these, and it's never been good. So when the SDGs were being negotiated, I, being a psychologist and a mental health advocate, worked with the ambassador of Palau in the Pacific Ocean. He was a medical doctor. And we came up with this diagram, which is that mental health and well-being is at the center of all these SDGs, because you will not protect the environment unless you feel good about it. You're not going to you won't throw garbage unless you feel like I own that environment and I'm going to take good care of it. So indeed, we did a huge campaign. I'm going to hand out a bunch of these later to you, where we did all sorts of events at the UN about the importance of mental health in everything. The importance of mental health for youth and poverty reduction. The importance of mental health in the AI movement. This was 10 years ago, and now it's in the Pact for the Future, so it's a very big deal. So we still are looking at the importance of mental health in all of these agreements. It has gotten into the Global Compact on Migration, mentioned 23 times. I was part of that. It is incredibly important. And the Mexico mission asked me and a friend to come and brief them, because they knew nothing about it. They said they had nothing to do with migration. It's an important issue here in Hungary and in all countries in the world, in Germany, who takes so many, and all the countries who take so many, and certainly for my country in the United States. And the question was, what does mental health have to do with it? And people would say nothing, but of course it does. Because if you don't have a home, is that not mental health? If you feel that you don't belong somewhere, you have no identity, that is mental health. So understanding the relevance of mental health is very important. Same in climate change. And that is so related to disaster recovery. So we made a big campaign to be sure that mental health was in the Sendai framework, which is, of course, from Japan, the Sendai framework about disaster recovery, because it is so important when people are dealing with floods and earthquakes and all these terrible things that happen. What about Pakistan and the flood there, and Turkey recently? It's all about how do people recover emotionally? The word at the UN, which is thrown around a lot positively, is resilience. It is a major word. You will hear a great deal. I imagine Denmark might be using it in the Security Council. We'll see. And so resilience is such an important phrase. So every single solitary major issue, from climate change to disaster recovery to migration, and certainly to peace and security, has mental health associations to it. Now, when the UN was first developed in 1945, what was it for? Peace and security. So the member states, who were the beginning of it, called in social psychologists and political psychologists in order for them to advise them about how do you get peace and security. It's not some general idea. They may argue about it, as they do in governments, but what about conflict resolutions? What can psychologists bring to that? Well, they can bring to it many techniques of finding common ground between different countries and being able, as Katalin and I know very well, because we're working on a book that is about diplomacy and psychology. She studied psychology, and she's certainly a brilliant diplomat. And I am a psychologist for many years, almost 50, and now in the diplomatic world. And so what do you think is the major technique that diplomats need to learn, that they can learn from psychologists? What is it? What is the technique? What is the skill? You should know.
Help.
What?
Help. Help.
Well, help, but keep listening. Listening, which is why I've written 2 books about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because I've been in that region many times. And it's called Beyond Bullets and Bombs. But I'm also, as a radio talk show host and a TV reporter and everything, and a couples counselor, wrote this book about the complete idiot's guide to a healthy relationship. You're shaking your head. So what does a healthy relationship have to do with peace in the Middle East? What? What do they need to learn? Empathy. Very good. Who said that? Take a stand. Stand up.
Peace and security.
Right. All right. Exactly. Empathy, walking in the other person's shoes, listening instead of just talking at each other, listening. What do you really have to say? I don't say it's going to solve the problems between Hamas or Iran and Israel, but it is important, and many, many studies have shown how important it is to just listen instead of talk. So that is a major issue. Now, I want to conclude. I brought a bunch of things here. You could pass these out. This is about peace and security, development and human rights in the United Nations, a little handout to remember, so you can hand out this. And this I brought for you is about welcome to the United Nations. It's all, do you mind handing these out? Okay, so I want to now...
She arrived with 4 luggages, I have to say. From New York.
4
We
luggages.
had to rent a special van.
Right, rent a special thing. Thank you. Right. So I also wrote this book. I only brought it because I'm donating it to the library. And it is 105 pages, over 1,000 pages, about resilient health, really because we specifically chose this word resilience, because that is the word that is being used at the United Nations, resilience, in order to appeal to things. Okay, so let me just finish with saying, you already said, Ambassador Nagy, you already said the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room here, which is why I didn't sleep last night and the night before, so I'm really exhausted, because I was up all night watching the news, because given that we're at the U-turn, friends, where are you? The whole idea of a U-turn is so brilliant, but we need to go forward this way. My question I asked last night that I really would like you all to be thinking about, particularly because I'm an American, is what is the EU going to do now? The United States has taken a big step forward. What will all the countries of the EU do? And given that Sierra Leone, which I represent, is sitting in the Security Council, and there you are in Denmark in the Security Council, along with the other EU countries, Greece, Slovenia, and of course, France, what will all of you now do individually or collectively in terms of what state and what major move America has taken in this war, which is being called? So that is something I think that we all need to pay attention to. In finalizing, I do want to say that the UN is in a global stage is looking for reform not just of the Security Council. So now, as an African state, representing an African state, of course, what we want, when we were president, we were supporting the Women, Peace, and Security agenda, which is a wonderful agenda. And we were also supporting Africa as a permanent member of the Security Council. Now, everybody wants to have their group of Security Council permanent member. It is unlikely it will happen. But all of these things, we will wait to see what ends up happening. And thank you for your theme, Ferenc, of the U-turn and which road. Let's talk. You're a poet. Did you all know he's a poet?
Do you know that, the third meaning of the U-turn is U-turn? U-turn, EU.
EU-turn. I understand.
It's in the hand of Denmark today. For a couple of days. And U-turn. So what said, do you turn?
Okay, so indeed, Robert Frost, you know very well, also did, and you all know, the road not taken. So what road will the EU and the individual countries and all of you collectively take as this world is now a new world since US has entered this horrific war? Thank you.